Bill this afternoon?
Yeah.
He
I
said
read
it
through
was
the
in good
application.
shape. He thought it was in good shape.
That's all I'm calling you, U.S. Attorney there.
He sure did. That's what we're doing, overcoming everything they've done.
I noticed that. If he owns it, probably pretty.
We ready?
So Fillmore felt like she's in good shape.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we will come to order for this special call meeting of the Randolph County Board of Commissioners. We have about 3 agenda items, business items tonight to take some action on. Some just to set some direction for the county. It's also my understanding that we have a birthday girl in the crowd tonight, do we? Where is she? Oh, there she is. Happy birthday, Jill. We will spare you and everybody at home the misery of hearing us sing happy birthday. But we do wish you a very happy birthday. I hope you've had a good one today, and sorry that you're not home, but maybe we can get you there before too late tonight to wrap up your day. So thank you.
I'm sorry we don't have a cake for you.
Yeah. I knew you was coming. We had to bake the cake. All right. So again, welcome all those that are present and those that are watching from home via YouTube or Facebook. And first of all, we're going to take care of some business related to emergency services. And I'm going to ask Hal to give us an update on that, especially for the public. We have some issues relative to shortages within our emergency services department and ability to keep our ambulances on the road and operating. So we're going to deal with that issue first, and then we're going to look at issues related to the American Rescue Plan request for money from various departments here in the county. Hal?
And also we'll be looking at some strategic planning projects that will be funded through the strategic planning funds, and then some, Will Massey will go over a little in more detail the recovery fund projects, and he'll talk to you briefly also about some of the requirements that are out there on these federal recovery funds and how we want to be sure that we follow that. The first item on the agenda, and I want to talk about emergency services. Donovan couldn't be here tonight. Donovan is tied up either manning a truck or he's at the morgue. And so I'm going to take care of some of the background that we want to talk about, updating you on emergency services and just some of the serious impacts that we have going on with emergency services and some of our recommendations to deal with that moving forward. But before I do that, I think it's important to realize and to step back and remember all that Randolph County has done for emergency services. That has been a major #1 priority of the Board of County Commissioners over the last several years. I think what Randolph County has done for emergency services, and Donovan agrees with me on this, is beyond what any other county that I'm aware of has put together in a relatively short time. We've increased the number of ambulance bases in Randolph County, 3 new bases just in the last few years, covering the southern portion of Randolph County, Coal Ridge and New Hope. Added a station up in Trinity. That's a high call volume area. New medical equipment for our ambulances and our paramedics. The new headquarters facility here in the state-of-the-art 911 center, where we have our emergency operations center and in our training space. That's one of the most functional offices that I've seen in North Carolina. We've had people from the state that's come there and said, wow, this is such an impactful plan that you put together to build a facility like this. And we saw during the pandemic when the public health department and our other emergency staff was all together in that emergency operations center, just how valuable that was and still is during the times of the pandemic. We built a morgue. We took the opportunity to build a morgue that we needed to do as our responsibilities as county government. Maybe as impactful as anything was we were able to move the 24-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts, and that included hiring 24 additional positions at EMS to allow them to go to 12-hour shifts instead of 24-hour shifts. Not to forget also the salary and position classification studies that the commissioners authorized. And what this did was allow us to make our emergency medical staff, their salaries comparable with the adjoining counties, because we're all in competition with each other in this day and age to be able to hire employees. So that the county has really addressed every issue facing emergency services in a very proactive manner, and that needs to be stated. The pandemic has had a major impact on emergency services, like it has all our departments, but it's probably hit emergency services the strongest. And what that impact is, it's caused us to have a shortage in personnel, in recruitment, in being able to hire people, offering the salary and the benefits and the approved positions, trying to get paramedics to come work for Randolph County. Now, this is not just a problem that Randolph County has, it's a problem that's statewide and nationwide in emergency services. It's being able to provide the services that people depend upon. In our Jill Williams, our Human Resources Director, Will Massey, our Assistant Manager and Finance Officer, and myself, over the past month, we've been having many meetings, and the Chairman of the Commissioners and the Vice Chairman of the Commissioners, we've met with the emergency services staff, allowing them to talk about what challenges they have in front of them and just what that means to Randolph County and what we can do to address personnel shortages at our emergency services operations. I'll give you some numbers right now. We have 11 full-time vacancies. Some of those vacancies have been filled. We have 8 vacancies for paramedics in our emergency services. We are actively recruiting. We've not been able to fill those positions. And what that means sometimes is that you have supervisors and administrative staff, all paramedics, are manning those ambulances so that they can take calls. And that eventually leads to a lot of issues and stress, not having the personnel to operate our ambulances. We met with emergency services, and we've tried to put together what can we do as a county to know that we're doing everything that we can to address the situation that's over there. And we came up with some recommendations tonight. One is for the 8 new paramedic positions that we've got, in an effort to help us try to recruit people to those positions, we're recommending that we approve a $4,500 sign-on bonuses for those 8 paramedic positions that we've not been able to fill. The other situation that's impacting emergency services, due to lack of staff, not approved positions, but lack of staff and not being able to recruit, is that our dedicated employees that are there are sometimes working multiple shifts so that those ambulances will be staffed and able to respond. We'd like to recommend that when they work those additional shifts, because you have to get volunteers to do that. You can't assign people to work multiple shifts. But when they do, we would like to be able to pay them $200 in addition to their normal salaries that they get for working extra shifts as a result of the shortage. During last budget, and again, this was an effort in trying to deal with a difficulty in recruiting telecommunicators. That's our 911 specialist. We created a new position called specialists in positions in telecommunicators. It's people that were learning to be 911 communicators. And there was 4 of those positions, and we found out now that they've been there, they've learned the job, they're certainly qualified to be telecommunicators, and we would take 4 of those positions and reclassify them to full telecommunicators. The last is a holiday buyback. Staff is been required, necessary to maintain services to work through their vacation hours. And we would ask for us, the county, to be able to buy back the holiday time that they've worked when they work over their normal 40 hours. This would pay them back for their holiday time that they've had to work that during this severe shortage. We have asked ourselves over and over again, that's why our Human Resource Director and Assistant Manager and Finance Officer is here too. We've asked ourselves, are we doing everything that we can do to fill these positions? We don't know if this will answer the question. We don't know if this will be successful. But it's the last answer that we have to deal with this crisis that's probably going to be with us for many, many years, if not forever. When you've got paramedics, those highly skilled people, they're in competition with registered nurses in hospitals that a lot of times are making more money than a paramedic does. And so you have a fluid job market out there where they can go from one area to another if they want to. And so there's lots of issues in emergency services that we're trying to deal with. I don't look at this as just throwing money at a problem, but I'm saying we don't know of anything else to do. And it may just be a Band-Aid, but it may fix it and it may not work at all. But it's the best recommendations that your staff can bring to you to try to deal with the issues that we have and to make sure that ambulances are on the road to respond to our personnel. I will mention too, and Jill Williams is here if there's any detailed questions. I did want to let the board know that the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the public that's watching this video on YouTube, we have an ambulance now that FEMA has provided the county. And that is if you see a white Mercedes van that says Coast to Coast EMS, on both sides, that is a van provided with 2 paramedics from Montana and Maryland by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. That will be stationed at the main office today, but Donovan said they'll use that in areas of high traffic that they're not able to provide a full ambulance. They'll be here for 2 weeks. And then they'll go to some other location. But I did want the board to know that we have got this.
Can that be renewed, or is it just 2 weeks?
It's 2 weeks, and then they go wherever else they're needed. They were here in North Carolina, and they went to Guilford County and Forsyth County first. But now they're responding to us. So they are here in Randolph County. So, Mr. Chairman, that's our recommendation, and as the action item, if the board would approve that special compensation measure that we have, I want to emphasize that most of that is being paid for with existing salaries that emergency services has in their budget because they're not able to fill their positions. Later tonight in Will Massey's presentation, we're going to talk about recovery money and how we want to put some of that recovery money, reserve some of it to be used for some of these issues also.
Hal or Jill, if somebody out here says, you know, they don't have a job, I mean, or they're working somewhere, they want to come to work for EMS, how long would it take to get certified to be a EMT or paramedic? Or How long before they could actually be put on an ambulance and go to work?
That's a Donovan question. It depends on, it depends on if they get an associate's degree. That's a 2-year program for paramedic, and that's really where our shortage is. But he's not here, but I'm thinking if they don't do that full associate's degree program, it might be as long as 18 months. They have a group in class now that will graduate, he told us next December of 2022. And I'm thinking they just started this fall, but then he said it would be the spring of 2023 before, I guess, they pass their certification and completely be released as paramedics.
But they would still be employed that whole time?
They can act as a technician, but a technician can't perform the full duties of a
Right.
paramedic.
Right.
How many are in the class, you know?
14.
14.
So there's a good number in the class. They're hopeful that half will make it. So it's pretty
Well,
strenuous.
and then
That's
they-
exactly.
If half makes it, then we gotta get that half
Exactly.
here, and that's the position you're talking about. right?
Yes, that's our goal.
Right. All right. Other questions about?
Well, I got a couple of questions, if I could. Could you put that first slide up there as to, yeah, that's it. The sign-on bonuses, when you're talking about a sign-on bonus for people that might be listening, how is that handled as far as you don't just hand them a $4,500 check?
No, and that's a good question, Max. No, we'll pay a third of that when we hire them, a third, I believe, in 6 months, and a third when they've stayed a year.
I believe it's in 4 pieces.
It might be in 4 pieces.
Now, I think it's good that people know you don't say sign here and then you give them $4,500.
Then they quit next week.
Right.
Yeah, there's qualifications to it as
Yes.
far as that's concerned, but, and I think that's fine because there's a lot of industries, hospitals nowadays that are having to do that kind of thing, and, but it's not just a matter of handing them money and
No.
saying, here you go. And on the buyback, we're talking about paying out excess hours earned over 40. Is that overtime? Is that time and a half? Is that straight time?
So the holiday buyback will be hour for hour. So it's holiday time that they have accumulated.
Right.
So if they have well, in excess of 40, but it would be hour for hour. It wouldn't be at time and a half.
Gotcha. Okay, I just wondering about that too, to make sure people out there that are watching knows that you're buying it back because they worked holidays and they worked other time, but it's not a time and a half situation. It's just buying the hourly, whatever their hourly rate would be at
Yes.
the time.
And because they've not been able to take that time because of the time the extra time they are working.
Right.
Good. Other questions?
The lap salaries that would cover the 230,000.
Not that one.
Not that one, that would have to be ARPA funds, okay.
We think that it would cover the top 3. That's what we anticipate. Now, depending on how long
Talk in the
item
mic.
number 2 takes, I'm sorry, depending on how long
Right.
item number 2 takes, that's the estimate per month. But right now, in their current salary, in their current budget, they should be able to cover 1, 2, and 3. But holiday buyback, the assistant county manager is going to talk about that more later.
Okay.
All right. Other questions?
Well, one more thing, if I don't mind. You said there's 11 vacancies. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I wrote down 8 paramedics. Is that true?
yes.
Is that in addition to the 11, or is that included?
That's included in the 11.
So, again, the 11 is a breakdown of 8 paramedics and 3,
There's some telecommunicators that I think those positions are being filled.
okay.
Is that the positions in the call center? The 3?
Yes, yes,
So we've picked up a couple. We had 5 the other day.
yeah. So we're still vacant on those paramedic positions.
This is his EMS right up here. So it's a couple of support staff in emergency services
Right.
that are vacant. Actually, that 11 is all emergency services.
So do we have more vacancies in the call center?
No.
These four?
We've got how many in the call center?
The 5.
5 in the call.
5 in the call center.
Five, 5 total vacancies right now in 911 center.
So are the 4 intake specialists going to fill those slots, or they're in addition to that?
2 of them will fill
Two-
those slots.
go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's why I
I'm
have
sorry.
Bill here.
So the emergency intake specialist, when they are reclassified to telecommunicators, will fill 2 of these slots. But a good thing with telecommunications is that they are currently training 5 people. So that's good for them. I don't know how long it takes for them to be fully trained, but they are training some people now that are just not able to be fully released to fully operate.
Okay.
So there's light at the end of the tunnel on that.
Exactly, yes, for the telecommunications.
Good. All right.
But the paramedics, I'm trying to get this in my head. The paramedics, you're down 8?
Yes, some of those or emergency medical service vacancies are also, they have a training specialist that they are down. They also have a logistics specialist that ensures that all of the ambulance bases are stocked and have all of the supplies they need. Those are 2, now, 2 of the 11 that were down. So I can't be exactly sure. I was thinking, though, that they did have at one time 10 EMT positions that, and like they said, they have, as the county manager said, they have filled 2. So they need 8. But some of those other positions are the support staff.
So right now, you're just covering them with personnel that's there working these extra hours.
Yes.
Are you running any vacancy of being able to run ambulances?
Yes, there have been instances where the trucks are shut down because there were not enough staff to man the ambulances.
Do we still have the 3? We had 3 the other day. Are they still out of
Yes.
service?
Yeah.
So would the FEMA reduce that to 2?
Yeah, the FEMA will help that a lot. And that's not permanent, okay? And then you
Yeah,
get people
2
out and they
weeks.
come back. But we've had situations where we did not have staff to man an ambulance.
That's the root of the problem.
Particularly the paramedics,
We just don't
because
have
all
that.
these are paramedic units.
Yeah, we don't have enough paramedics to fill all the positions.
Right.
But both of the FEMA guys are paramedics.
They are paramedics.
All right, other questions? Okay, then the request or the issue before us is a need for a motion to approve the special compensation measures for emergency services as has been outlined and discussed here before us.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the special compensation measures for emergency services. Other discussion or questions? Those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And it's approved. And I guess this goes into effect immediately.
Yes, it does, tomorrow morning.
All right.
And Will Massey now will begin a review of strategic planning and the recovery funds and the projects.
And I wanted to say, as Will comes forward, the Treasurer's Office, U.S. Treasurer's Office is still writing these rules. And we've been giving this a whole lot of due diligence. We got the money, the first disposition, I think back in May, wasn't it, Will?
Yes, sir.
We want to make sure that we don't use the money for something that's not allowed and then have to give it back after it's been spent. And that would not go over too good for any of us. So that's the reason for the deliberation and that we're taking as we go through this process. And Will's been guiding us. I know our state association's been involved, the school of government's involved, LGC's involved, but it's still quite a bit of work in process. So just want to make those comments. People want to know when we're going to get our money. Well, as quick as we feel comfortable in doing that. Okay, Will.
Exactly right. Thank you, sir. Good evening. What I plan to do tonight is briefly talk about the funding sources that we've got, the options that the board may have. I want to go back over those federal guidelines. As the chairman said, we're not dragging our feet, but we are being very cautious, and we want to just go back over some of those guidelines again, just so the public knows what we're facing. And then a review of some of the applications that we've received, both for strategic planning and for the American Recovery Plan, Rescue Plan recovery funds.
Will, how about, just again for public, the strategic planning money, separate from ARP money, but where that money comes from, what
Right.
we've done with it?
Yep. I've got a slide, we'll cover all
Okay,
that.
oh, I'm sorry.
Pull your mic up.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
There you go, you're big.
All right, better? All right. So what I'm talking about here is strategic planning money and recovery funds, two different things. The purpose of the strategic planning money was initiatives that support the goals identified in our 2016 county strategic plan. Any restrictions are determined by the Board of County Commissioners. Any reporting is determined by the Board of County Commissioners. Audit requirements, just a straight financial audit from any organization that gets it. And the amount that is available to us right now, what we've set aside for years is the land lease from Waste Management. And that's been $1 million plus a inflation adjustment. But also this first year, this July, we also got several $100,000 from variable tonnage rates, and that's in that figure as well too. So $1,247,863 is now available for any strategic planning projects that the board wants to do. The recovery funds are a whole different story. Federal recovery funds came through the American Rescue Plan. They're federal. They have all kinds of restrictions. They are, according to the legislation, this money is to respond to the negative effects of the coronavirus as defined in that legislation. And U.S. Treasury has issued an interim final rule. It really clarifies how you can use these funds. However, it's interim, so it's not final, despite the fact that it says final, it's interim. And also, there is so much confusion over some of the provisions in it, what applies, what doesn't apply, that it's just not in our interest to jump on this too soon. There's quarterly reporting that's due to the federal government. So if we give monies to another organization, they've got to report to us in time for us to report to the Treasury. Audit requirements. This is where it gets a little stickier because some of these organizations may have had financial audit in the past, but depending on what the level of federal funds they get, it may move them up to where they have to get their auditors to do a yellow book audit, which they may or may not be experienced doing. Anything over $100,000 is yellow book, and that's federal requirements that would specify internal controls. So the auditor would have to write a letter on the organization's internal control structure. There's requirements on the auditors for independence, things like that. That's anything over $100,000. And then a single audit, if it's over $750,000, I think the last time I checked, it falls under single audit. So Seagrove is the only one that their total allocation would fall under $100,000. So the municipalities are looking at, even if they haven't had one in the past, at least a yellow book audit. So we received $13,953,615 in May of 2021. That's half the allocation. The other half we'll get next May.
Next May being 22.
Of 22. So I want to go over these briefly, but I won't spend a whole lot of time unless the board has questions. But just to make it clear, the subrecipients are also responsible for these federal guidelines and their requirements, and that might be everything from written policies and procedures. We have to document internal controls over the federal funds, who's approving it, who's controlling it. We have to have certain contract provisions that have to be written into these contracts. They have to check the vendors. So they may have been using a vendor for years, but they still have to check to make sure that they haven't been dealing with North Korea, and they have to document all that kind of stuff. All the usual federal requirements, EEOC, Drug-Free Workplace, Civil Rights Act, ADA, that type of thing. The real sticky part is the federal uniform guidelines. And these were created years ago, and they apply to any federal funds unless it's been excluded that they don't apply or any provisions don't apply. So Treasury has made it clear federal uniform guidelines will apply. And that is where you have to document everything related to the costs. Everything, your justifications, why you decided to do this or that, bidding and contracting requirements. There's certain things that have to be done, competitive bidding, minority businesses, all that kind of thing, purchasing, timesheets, and payroll records if you're going to charge salaries. As an example for the complexity here and why we have to be careful, the Treasury has said the uniform guidelines apply. The uniform guidelines say if you're doing a capital project, for instance, you have to get a pre-approval from the grantor agency. Treasury says, we're not pre-approving. Okay, we're getting ready to spend millions of dollars on capital projects, and we don't know whether it needs to be pre-approved or not. Is that smart to move forward on that? Don't think so. So we're just waiting to get things clarified to make sure we know exactly what we need to do before we start spending this money. Reporting, Treasury has come up with, based on the legislation, these 7 categories. So when we pick a project and we want to fund that project, it has to fall within these categories. Within these categories, public health, negative economic impacts, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and administrative. Within all those categories, they break it down even further. So when we start to report exact costs, any project that we have has to fall within one of these categories. For instance, vaccination costs is a 1.1. Public health's 1, so 1.1 is vaccination. If it's other public health services, it's 1.12. If we're talking about negative economic impacts, any kind of a food assistance program for households, it's a 2.1. If it's rehiring public sector staff, it's a 2.14. We have to identify, when we approve a project, how are we going to report it? Is it going to fit in here? And if it's not, can we make it work? So the question tonight is, which funding source do we want for some of these applications? We've asked for applications both for strategic planning over the years and then now for the ARP, Rescue Recovery Plan. So we've got a number of applications out there, and we just kind of want to review those quickly. The recovery applications, what the board may want to consider is taking some of those projects, instead of being ARP, and moving them to strategic planning. If they move that forward, then those projects can go ahead and get started. They don't have to jump through all the hoops that they're going to have to if we award them as ARP projects. So I think it's something that the board wants to seriously consider, given the fact that we do have some strategic money available. And then the board may want to talk about some of the applications that you might still want to consider as federal projects. We're not here to make decisions tonight because we're just not ready. But if the board wants to talk about any of those, we can go over. So just again, strategic planning has 1.2 million, and the American Rescue Plan has 13 million. We won't be talking about infrastructure tonight. We do plan to hire a consultant to help us work through that, because it's not just any water and sewer project. Those are limited in some fashion as well too. So we want to make sure that we are using these funds to the best possible purpose. So we've gotten 3 new strategic planning applications recently. I just wanted to put these on the table. The board can make decisions or not make decisions. If you want more information, we can contact these agencies. Town of Liberty had requested $99,000 for an outdoor community engagement and depot preservation project. Town of Seagrove had requested $108,000 for sidewalks to connect the library and the businesses and elementary school. And then Partnership for Children has pitched an early childhood community survey to gather data for possible additional funding. I know Commissioner Haywood's knowledgeable about that one. So if you want to talk about any of those, we can, or we can keep on moving down the road.
Anybody have any questions? I would say too, again, for public, Will has been meeting one-on-one with the commissioners to go over these numbers and the requests from the various agencies and towns, et cetera. So this is not the first time we've seen these requests.
If I might, if I can, on one that you've got there, I see, on the Seagrove request for the sidewalks. You look at that and say, well, you know, we're talking about sidewalks and whether, that's something that is, can be dealt with, but I know they've been trying to figure a way to get sidewalks, down there for years.
Yeah, I know they've been working with DOT, but
Right, they've
getting
been
on,
working with
get on their
DOT.
funding schedule is just not really.
They're not making it very readily available, and you got a town with 300 people in it, and it's hard for them, it's going to be extremely hard for them to come up with $108,000 to be able to do that kind of project. I'm just saying that, you know, you look at that and go, well, that's sidewalks, and surely DOT will help and all that jazz, but they've been asking for years trying to figure out a way to do this, and it hasn't worked. So that's one of the reasons I know that they're asking for it here, in this manner, is because the town's not large enough to be able to come up with those kind of monies, and so far they haven't had any help from state level to do that. So that's just a pitch I have for that, knowing something about that situation.
Very good.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on now to the actual American Recovery Plan applications that we have received. And what we want to recommend is consider, I think there's 5 here, of moving them to strategic planning projects and going ahead and authorizing funding for those. The first would be the Family Crisis Center, Emmy's House, $134,207. That was to hire some additional personnel and to move the services to children a little stronger. Another project was Partnership for Children. They were proposing some library-based navigators to provide advisory services out there to the public. See how that's working and then revisit that another year. But that would be $250 for that project. Town of Liberty, the Heritage Museum was $99,000. They wanted to purchase a hardware store building up there and convert that into a museum. Asheville Randolph Chamber of Commerce, the business gym, that was developed to develop a web-based portal to where businesses, new businesses especially, could go and get some valuable information to make them more sustainable. So with all the transition, because of the pandemic, a lot of businesses closing, other businesses opening, there's seems to be a real need for this. I think they had pushed it to $100,000. We've got it listed here at 50. I don't know if that was 2 years or. Okay, so those are the ones that we've had some discussions about. Do any of those rise to the level of urgency enough to where the board wants to go ahead and authorize funding? If you pick any of these projects, we can do the budget amendment at the November meeting and get those all going. So this is just to be authorizing any projects that you want using strategic planning money.
And I guess, Will, one of the drivers is the reporting requirements and the size of some of these organizations. It could be a real can of worms. Not to say the administrative costs would be substantial.
They don't understand what they're asking for.
In other words, if you're gonna use ARP funds, you better have somebody that's already subject to those requirements, or it better be a big chunk of money.
Mm-hmm. To make it worthwhile.
To make it worthwhile.
And Maxton has drawn reference to the Seagrove project, but our municipalities also received ARP funds, but those funds were actually passed through from the state of North Carolina. For example, I think Seagrove gets about $75,000. So that's not a big windfall, especially for these smaller towns. Asheboro, Archdale, Trinity, Randleman, probably the ones with the biggest amounts, but still, the smaller communities have, their needs are big, and they don't have the resources to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my point, is when you got Seagrove that gets less money than Staley,
Got less than Staley.
and they're wanting to be able to put some sidewalks in place. And I know they've been wanting to try to find the funding for years to try to do that, and it's just almost beyond their means to be able to find it. And they have asked the DOT to help them,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's just not there.
The High Point MPO, which is the municipal or the urban part of RPO, rural planning organizations, they get dedicated sidewalk money. High Point's forever putting in sidewalks. They get a particular amount to fund for those. I think the rural don't deal with sidewalks like the MPOs do.
I'd like to speak just to a couple of these others that came in late. You know, the latter ones all made presentations. They were here earlier, so the public will be familiar with those requests if they've been following this. But with the depot preservation, the town of Liberty and the library have the opportunity to take a historic depot there that has been well maintained and bring it over and put it on the library property there, and then use it for library programs. Part of the focus in children's programming is bringing learning outdoors. So that would give the library another place to bring learning from inside the library out. And they can use the stage. They've talked about using it for, you know, little productions and things like that with the children. So, so that's what this depot preservation is. The Partnership for Children, this is, this $50,000 is like, it's like a gap assessment, and it actually looks at the services that we have in place, the money that we have, the services that we have in place in our community, so that we're just not saying, well, I think this money's making a difference. I think this, you know, this program is helping. You know, this assessment would be done by the Institute for Family of Greensboro, and so they have a strong reputation and history in doing this kind of thing. And so then that assessment report will be used to drive future decisions and to inform, you know, county investments. So I think it's valuable. I know the Department of Public Health did one back in 2016, and we're working with data that was gathered then. Now, there was recently an article in the paper about how that's driving services. So I do think it's a valuable assessment and would give us great information so that we can use taxpayer money wisely. The other thing is, I would just like to point out, just for the commissioners, just to keep in the back of your mind, when the partnership requested, their original request was enough for 3 years for this new program, bringing together the, you know, library, social services, public health, the partnership, bringing them all together to help connect families of very young children with services. So the original request was enough for 3 years, and the reason for that is because, you know, you want to use that, the data over a long enough time period to ascertain if it's working or not. So they would not use it all this first year, so this amount would get it off the ground and get it going. But my one concern there is that it's already October, and if we're looking at this again, would we look at this again next October, next summer, with the budget season? I mean, a year, or even by the time they would get it going, you know, 8 months is not enough to really have a lot of driving information. So I just want, you know, everybody here to keep that in the back of your minds, so that when they come back for another year, you know, we're just going to have to realize that they've only gotten this program off the ground and will not even have a full year of programming and data yet.
Yeah, but we have till December of '24 to encumber this money, so it doesn't actually have to be spent. So you have got time to.
Well, this is
Keep
strategic
watching.
plan money, so
Oh, that's right, it is.
Yeah, it's strategic
I'm
planning
sorry.
money.
we got,
That's right.
we got forever.
Yeah, right.
And there's no timeline with strategic planning money, so the board can reconsider at any point in time that they want to.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing too, with the strategic planning, if this goes through tonight, that money's available tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So that was part of our strategy, was to get this money out there in action quicker.
Yeah, the budget amendment will be at your November 1st
Right.
meeting, so technically it'll be next week.
Will, I know we've used the waste management funds for other sources and over the years, you know, to balance out debt. Now, I mean, this is kind of a big picture kind of thing, but what are we looking at as far as the availability of those funds? The 1.25 million roughly, in budget projections in the next 2 or 3 years. In other words, if we're looking at a program for 3 years, is that money projected to be available for strategic planning? I know that's a kind of a loaded question, but
Yeah, I don't know that the manager and I have any initiatives to present to you other than, you know, using that for strategic planning purposes.
okay. I know we've used it to offset, to build up some reserves for debt service and that kind of thing, but.
Yep.
Okay.
No, we've got through that, so, you know, my
I know
assumption will
things
be, it'll
change
be
and
fully
I'm not gonna hold
available.
to it, but I just,
Yep,
it's not encumbered in anything else that we foresee at this point.
yeah.
Okay.
The only caveat is, you know, we got variable funding, variable tonnage funding this year.
Yeah.
And that's out of our control. We don't know what we'll get next year. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. But certainly the 1.1 is what the core base lease amount was for this year, and I think that will continue to grow.
I think that's gone from a minimum of $1 million to the $1.25 million that we've got now. The additional tonnage out there brought, another couple of $100,000.
Right. So, you know, the recommendation on those 5, moving them from ARP, was the 533 that I think you might have in front of you. If you want to add any of the other strategic planning projects, the assessment, the sidewalks, anything else, that's in addition to the 533. That was, just to make sure that that was clear, that was not everything that's being proposed, but the 533 was just those 5 projects.
And I would point out too, that with what's recommended here, leaves about a little over $700,000 of the $714,656 still available through this year's strategic planning money.
So were you
don't
saying
that much.
the 533 includes the 4 that we've talked about and not the 3 that were presented?
Yes.
So it's going to be a little bit less than that, Chairman, I think.
Well, the 533 is the ones that we were recommending moving from ARP
Right.
over.
So we
Those
gotta
first
add
three
the
that I
other-
mentioned for strategic planning are not part of that total.
Yeah, we've got to add
But
this
these-
other 257.
These 7 total 533,
No,
don't they?
no, the
No, just-
bottom 4, the second 4.
Wait a minute.
These 4 here.
Yeah, I see them. I know.
Okay, the first three were not in that 533 total.
533.
All right.
The total of the 7, according to my calculations, is $790,207.
Well, I mean,
Maxton, did I get that right?
Yeah, I think you got that
Should
right.
be, I believe, about 800 off, 450 left. Is that
Two
right?
57. Isn't that right? 257.
Carry that.
And I personally think it's good to have some left because you don't know what we're going to face.
We're not through the year yet.
Yes.
About 850, 450 left, is that what it is?
Just to summarize, I assume you're talking about all three of the strategic planning projects and the other 5 that we wanted to move from American Recovery Plan to strategic planning. Okay.
There's number 4.
I just
Yeah, we just didn't know.
4.
Was there 4?
4 and
4, not 5.
790,207.
we do with that.
863. It leaves about 457,000. 656.
92 for both of these. Is that what you get?
And I really want to push for that extra year for the partnership, but I'll be patient.
So 7 and 3, 5 and 9, yeah, 790, just under 800,000.
790,207.
That's correct.
That leaves 457,656. All right.
Motion,
You want to start, you going to go with those others?
did y'all vote on that yet?
We haven't voted yet.
No, we haven't voted. I'm saying, you want to vote on these, well, the other 4 that's in the 533,
You want,
You can take
Okay.
them one at a time if you'd like,
yeah.
if that would be easier.
why
That's up to
don't we just do it, is any opposition to doing them all at the same time?
I was just going to do them all at one time.
you. You can, I just didn't know.
I'll make a motion that we approve the following projects, the Town of Liberty with outdoor community engagement, EPO preservation, the downtown Seagrove sidewalks for $108,000, the Liberty was $99,000, the early childhood community survey for $50,000, and then also include from the original strategic, moving it to strategic planning and improving those, would be Emmy's House, $134,207, library-based navigators for $250,000, Liberty Heritage Museum for $99,000, the business gym for $50,000.
For a total of 790,207.
Correct.
I'll second that motion.
All right? We have a motion to approve the 7 projects that are here listed. Any questions, further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And they're approved.
Okay,
You'll have a budget amendment next Monday.
that's correct.
All right.
We'll make that happen. All right. Just want to briefly go back over some of the other art projects that I've heard the board discuss as being of interest. Cooperative Extension has a food system initiative for $219,000. A digital literacy skills initiative for $265,000. Deep River Trails of $1 million. Tourism Development Authority, maybe $500,000. City of Ashboro had requested, $1.55 million for McCrary Park as they improve the ball field. Town of Seagrove, the historic Lux Cannery was $500,000. Now, none of those are being moved forward tonight because we still are waiting to find out, exactly how to make some of these things happen. The last item I had on the agenda for you all tonight was an initial allocation for county purposes. We know that we need to continue to buy masks and other PPE. We know we're going to have other testing costs and whatever else might pop up. Those are pretty standard and are going to, fly with all the restrictions. So we know how to handle that. And if the board's willing to go ahead and set a pot of money aside out of the ARP funds, then we can have a budget for those and start to spend that money. We also have talked about improving clinical space and ventilation at the public health facility. That's, could be as much as $2 million. And then public safety salaries and benefits. The restrictions are a little bit differently than the CARES Act. The CARES Act money was thrown out there without a lot of federal restrictions because the emergency was fresh and they just wanted the money used to deal with whatever we were facing. The ARP money is totally different. And so you can still use it in some cases for public safety, salaries and benefits. The fourth item that was mentioned as far as what we want to do for emergency measures, emergency services, was the holiday buyback. And if they can't take their time because they continually have to work more holidays, then paying them off, I think, would satisfy some of the requirements under the ARP. If they allow you to hire people back, certainly they will allow us to try to stabilize the public safety positions. So if you're willing to do that, I'd suggest maybe a $4 million set aside, on Monday night's agenda, the consent agenda, and
Well, again,
that will get us started.
Just for the math, if we came back and approved those 6 items that are listed for ARP funds, and the $4 million that I think we're going to do for the county, then we've got $5,919,565 left to spend.
Of the initial allocation?
Yes.
Yeah,
And then we haven't addressed any infrastructure issues yet.
correct.
Okay. And this is the 1-year funding, the first year of the 13-9.
This would come out of that, yes. We'd just go ahead and set that aside.
current-
We may not
current-
spend it till
current cash we
till
have.
next year, but of the entire allocation that we're expecting, is the board comfortable setting aside $4 million so that we know as things pop up 3 months from now, 6 months from now, that
but we think
we've got something to work with.
But some of these are one-time requests. Okay.
Well, all but probably one of them's a one-time request, I think, maybe. But,
All right? So,
the 4, so you're looking at the 4, for all intents and purposes, as a set-aside for the whole 28.
Yeah.
But
At this
we're-
point in time, I
we're
don't have-
setting aside this out of the first year's grouping here, whatever, just to get it out off our plate and already.
And
So
it's
give them,
kind of our,
it's not 4 and 4, it's not even 2 and 2, it's just gonna be 4 up front. We're-
We may not spend that whole 4
Yeah.
before we get the second allocation.
Back to, yeah.
it's kind of the county's, our piece that we're going to spend and not
As you know.
recirculate to somebody else.
yeah.
And if we don't spend the 4, then it goes back into the big pool.
The big
We
pool.
have to need to do that.
It keeps us from,
Be some administrative.
y'all coming in with one at a time, so to speak, for these requests every month or whatever. Gives you more flexibility, and we know where we are for the set-aside. So the item before us is just information on those 6 projects. We're not taking action on those. The action item before this board is to approve the $4 million set aside for county-related COVID pandemic expenses. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we approve the initial county allocation of $4 million from the recovery funds.
That's-
Second.
I hear a second, Hope.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Further discussion or questions? Okay, those in favor of the allocation will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And it's approved.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Will. Good job. All right. Hal, do you have anything else?
We talked a little bit about infrastructure, and we're in the process of working with an engineering firm to help provide some guidance on this moving down the road. So that's still in the development stage.
Set up a meeting here.
Not yet.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, this has not been an easy task for these guys, you and Will, either one, and, the board too, as far as that's concerned. It's not something we've just kind of thrown something at and see if it'd stick on the board, or stick on the wall, I guess you could say. You guys have done a good job, as far as I'm concerned, with what you've done and how you've presented in a very conservative manner, to try to do it the right way the first time.
Yeah, I said it a little earlier, we want to make sure that we don't have to give anything back. If we go through this process and we meet these needs, we certainly don't want to have to take it away from these agencies and projects that we're going to continue to support.
Mr. Chairman, at the Board of Directors for the Association, County Commissioners Association, they were stressing that that counties don't need to be in a rush to do this, that there might be even a longer period than what we have that could be extended out further just to simply spend these funds.
Yep.
And the Director, Kevin Leonard, had indicated that the state, in their budget, if it passes, they've got $10 million to the association that would go toward helping counties navigate through this maze of federal issues, and getting the right, because you can imagine some of the smaller counties. I gave an example, Hal, of there was a county down east that had a county manager that was the emergency management services director too.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that there are a lot of folks going to need some help. So, but Will and Hal, y'all do a good job on getting all that taken care of. So, but that's the extent of it. It's going to be a long-term process.
Complicated.
Mr. Chairman, I would echo that too. That's on the county attorney listserv that's been discussed often, that additional time may be provided.
This is a working process, and there's still work to do. Lots. All right, any other business
Well, that's
tonight?
good. I just wanted to, because I know, just kind of looking out from tonight, I mean, when we look at that next group of projects there, I mean, most of these people are represented here, so.
Yep.
But I guess, they're willing to be patient and everything, and everybody, I just wanted to, if you had any clarification, or Hal did, just on timeline and understanding and patience on this. And obviously, you've heard it's a complicated process. We will make sure we jump through all the hoops correctly. But, I know that, they came just kind of see where we're going on this and what our timeline looked like, so,
Yeah, I think all of them have a project in this
yeah,
bigger, the bottom group there.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank y'all for being with us through this whole process. Some of you were early presenters in requesting the funds. And we will, as we know, we'll get them out there for you as we get clear projections or instructions on how to use the money. Is there any other business to come before this board tonight? I would say this, in yesterday's High Point Enterprise, there was an article on the variety section of and David, you probably know, the founding of the Chicago Bears football team. And I know George Hallis has been given most of the credit for that. They were actually founded by Mr. A.E. Staley of Randolph County, North Carolina. They were the Decatur Bears. He had a starch business from Randolph County. He went to Illinois, started a starch business that became very successful, and he started a football team out of his employees. And he wanted a bigger audience, and he moved them to Chicago, and then he hired George Hallis to run the Chicago Bears. So the founding of the Chicago Bears football team came out of, and we have a town named after Mr. Staley, right here in Randolph County, A.E. Staley. It's a great article. I'll bring it and maybe get the clerks to get you a copy of it, but it's a very interesting read. So, very interesting. Yes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Yes, sir.
Like one of the old
I never heard that.
I got it up there in my
Amazing.
car.